Welcome to another edition of Strange New Pod. I'm your Fleet Admiral and host, Julian Brown, alongside the best bridge crew this side of Wolf 359, though that's not necessarily a good thing.
Because it was an inside job?
Because it was an inside job. Captain Hawk is here, ready and waiting for assimilation, and Captain MC is here, who should be really proud, by the way, of the awesome Best of Both Worlds Fight Night poster that you made for patrons. It is badass. It is awesome. We have a couple of cool things we're going to do with that, so you should be proud. It's really cool.
Oh, thank you so much. I like doing that.
Yeah. How we doing?
We're doing all right. Doing
all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. I like doing all right. All right is good. All right is fine. I'm going to make a quick editor and producer and weird note. We had a bad storm here like a couple of hours ago. Power went out and it blew my trackpad. So I'm controlling my computer, my main computer that I host the show from my MacBook Pro with my MacBook Pro. So I'm going to have a really hard time typing in the chat tonight. So if you don't see us active in the chat, that's just because I'm kind of Scottying this whole, I'm Scottying this whole thing. It's a jerry-rigged system right now, but we made it work. We made it work. This week we are here to celebrate the 35th anniversary of the Best of Both Worlds Part 1. We're doing both episodes because you can't not do both episodes. The Best of Both Worlds aired Part 1 on June 18th, 1990, and Part 2 on September 24th, 1990. This episode is just an incredible piece of Trek, highly regarded as maybe one of the best pieces of Trek, if not the best piece of episodic Trek ever. I know we're going to go into it a lot more, but I just want to get your guys' very quick opinions. Why does this episode matter so much still 35 years later?
Changed the game. Really, I think a lot of television kind of took cues from this one, because of what it did. I mean, given the fact that we walked into this back in the day, not knowing how it was going to end, not knowing it was going to end on a cliffhanger like this. It's so explosive. It's what's made it so great, and knowing you had that entire summer. I mean, way back when we were kids watching this, summers lasted forever. So it seemed like a millennia between like this episode and the next. And the fact that both episodes delivered so big, it's why we're still talking about it 35 years later.
Yeah.
In terms of television Trek, I think that this is the first weighty thing that really happened to any of the characters. Like, this episode changed the entire Trek landscape in terms of, Wolf 359 plays a part in Sisko's backstory.
Yes.
The whole Locutus assimilation thing. It doesn't go away. It's not like when Uhura's memory gets erased and it just disappears the next episode. Some might say that they keep the whole Locutus assimilation plot going a little too long. But it's something that absolutely sticks with Picard up until the last season of Picard. So it really grounds the characters, which is really funny to say in, when it's, like sci-fi aliens.
Well, no, but well put, well said. Yeah, I mean, I'm lucky enough. I was 86, 87, 88, 89, 90. I was 4, but I was already well into watching Star Trek then. I remember, I remember this. It was insane. It didn't mean the same to me as some other people, probably because they were older and understood it more. And it was a big fucking deal that, like, oh God, that's the biggest cliffhanger in Trek history. I'm just a 4-year-old watching Star Trek. Like, the Borg scared the shit out of me.
Yeah.
But like, damn. So important. We are going to talk about so much of this. We're going to talk about how this is kind of the blueprint for, television cliffhangers to this day. MC mentioned character arcs and grounding them. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about, obviously, the Borg, Riker versus Shelby. So much in these 2 episodes. But first, Hawk, my friend, it has been a minute. We need to thank our patron collective at the Ready Room level and above, please.
So thank you once again to Simon Stager, Jeff Reeve, Tallulah, Jen Stein, Tina Alexander, Joe Saporito, Noe Santos, Kang Wee, Takako Nagumo, Fernanda Nogales, SMK, Colin Davidson, Shatterhand 2049, Jesco, Michael Graham, Emily N. Travis, Maggie Light, Wayne Ritz, Scone of Arc, Sean, Jay Howard, Mahalani Uchiyama, Matt Harker, Joshua Lewis, Tara Pollen, Slope 74, Rude Parakeet, Adam Sanders, Aaron W., Carl Angoli, Michael Kwan, Caitlin, Elizabeth Dean, Jim McMahon, Sedano 317, Puka Hair, Three Fries Short, Cat Tip, Tripping the Reed Alert Over a Pineapple, Sean Manning, Asher at the Bat, Chris Waterman, RHCB, Martin Simpson, Norman Buckwald, David Prime Hildebrand, Taryn J. Robinson, Rod Grinner, Eric the Red, Trouble, Jamie Roberts, Honeyberry, Paul Taylor Pitt, Brett Jones, Michelle P., Margin Walker 89, Melissa Bartell, Jesse Robbins, Kim, and Chris Finoglio.
Hey, you guys all freaking rock. Thank you so much. You keep the lights on. And speaking of keeping the lights on, a big thank you to our Badmirals, our EPs, who do keep all our alcoves regenerating. Hey. That's Simon Stager, Chris Waterman, Tara Pohl, and Brett Jones, Dana, Matt Harker, Jim McMahon, and Maggie Light. Thank you guys so much. We're going to get into some very quick news. I had the absolute privilege this past weekend of being at Tribeca Festival in New York City. Got to interview a lot of the cast and the executives of Strange New Worlds, and it was awesome. Got to hang out with some great friends after, and all of our coverage is on YouTube right now and all of our socials. You could check that video out. Also, I've been uploading the individual stories of the individual interviews if you want to see those. So check those out as well. It was a lot of fun. It was really cool.
And you did a fantastic job on those.
Thank you. Very quickly, as I mentioned at the top of the show, MC, you designed some amazing quarterly Patreon merch for our collective members, if you want to quickly talk about it.
Yes. So I did, for the anniversary of the Best of Both Worlds, I did a boxing poster, which is the... Oh, what did I call it again?
The something at Wolf 359, the fight at Wolf
359. The front line at Wolf 359. Yes, and it has Locutus and Riker on it, and I'm quite proud of all of the tiny references I was able to get in on it.
So many.
And the other thing that I did is, continuing our Voyager postcards, I made a Greetings from Fairhaven postcard.
Yes, and it is gorgeous as well. That'll be sendable, just like our previous Voyager one. Be on the lookout next few weeks for that stuff. Patron Collective members, it's awesome. Draft is not here tonight, but she will be at BayCon in a couple of weeks. Make sure that if you're going to be in the Bay Area, you go check her out. She's got a lot of panels, a lot of cool stuff happening there. And then I'm not wearing it tonight because I was panicking to get this show live, but we have merch and it's awesome. And we're going to be, keep adding stuff to our store. It's strangenewpod.bigcartel.com. Go check it out. Speaking of our patrons, one of the things that we are going to set up fairly soon for you is a tiered discount code. So you guys can get discounts off of our merch. But yes, strangenewpod.bigcartel.com. Go check it out. It's fancy. That's it. I didn't do a strange new loop because there's just so much to talk about with this episode. I really don't think that we need one. So we're just going to go, if everybody's good. Did I miss any other news? We good?
I think we're good.
Good. Okay. I'm just going to go into our first section here, which is the fact that, as we talked about near the top, the Best of Both Worlds Part 1 is the blueprint for cliffhangers, right? The Mr. Worf fire. And I am actually going to play that clip for everybody right now. I don't know if you guys are watching along on YouTube. You may not be able to see it, but I'm sure you remember it. But here, let's check this clip out real quick.
From this time forward, you will service us. Mr. Worf, fire.
I mean, Hawk, you lived it, I think, more than probably MC and I did. Like, what even now, like, what does that feel like?
You still feel the same chills in that because, like I said, no idea this was going to be a cliffhanger in that. Nothing before this had indicated that like this was going to end on a cliffhanger. You know, Star Trek up to that point, you know, the first 2 seasons had finales and that came back, you know. One great finale, one really bad one. Taking the trip through Riker's memories. The clip show. This, it just came out of nowhere. It's like we're watching the clock. It's like there's only like 2 minutes of the show left. What the hell is going on? And then seeing Picard as Locutus, like I really don't know how to put it into words.
It
Like,
changed
it
TV, right?
it was it was stunning. Like, you know, like nobody did this to the main character of a show, you know, especially in the final episode of the season. To make him a part of this villain that they were trying to build up ever since the end of season 1, you know, and you know, introduced in season 2. Like I said, it took my breath away. And then seeing like, you know, like Riker give the order to fire, you know, I think like probably the biggest TV explosion at that time had to be like, you know, who shot JR? That was a whole meme at that time. That's, you know, that might have been like, you know, the antecedent of this.
Yeah.
But this, like, you know, seeing like Riker give the order to fire and then seeing you know, to be continued. It just, I definitely processed that for at least an hour or 2 in that before I could even get to sleep.
MC, how about you? How did this, you know, when did you first watch this? What was it like for you? Because I know you're kind of newer to your Trek journey.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out when I first watched this. I did not watch it live. I'm absolutely certain of that. But I probably watched it in the late 90s because this was certainly something that they put onto Trek marathons when they did like the best of Trek. And this ending it's so iconic that I can't remember watching it for the first time because did I see it just through pop culture osmosis before I saw it full? I'm not sure, but certainly like, yeah, this changed everything. Cliffhangers were not a new thing, obviously, because the whole name cliffhanger comes from the old serials where people would be hanging off of a cliff.
Yeah.
But I think that this and Who Shot JR is a really good example of it. Kind of helped revive it because it had kind of become a joke that you would have these cliffhangers and then at the very start of the next episode, everybody would be fine. Mm-hmm. But with this, it's not like everything's fine afterwards. The Battle of Wolf 359 is really fucking bad.
Yeah.
What happens to Picard is really fucking bad. And I think like there's so much that impacted it. The whole idea that they didn't know what was going to happen with Patrick Stewart. It's like maybe like, oh, well, we got to have him go out on a really high note. And that's why this first part was written so well. There was just this wonderful confluence of events that I don't think anybody had any idea that it was going to be this.
Yeah, no, they definitely didn't. It's still wild to think about to this day. MC just brought up a great point, Hawk. Part of the reason this cliffhanger was written this way is because fans didn't know if Patrick Stewart was coming back. His contract was up. And, you know, a cliffhanger like this, even though they'd been done with what MC was talking about, hadn't been quite done like this, where like people, you know, through like newspapers and rumors before the internet still found out about things and people knew his contract was up. So what was that like? Did you have any inkling of what was going on?
Like, honestly, I don't know if I really followed the behind the scenes of it at that point. You know, I think at that point I was mostly getting into music and that. You know, Trek was my thing. I don't ever remember feeling like, oh my God, is this it? Is this the last we're ever going to see of Picard? Because it just wouldn't have made sense, you know, given the fact that, you know, the last image we saw of him is as Locutus, and then we hear Riker say fire. You know, I think even back then, part of me realized that there's got to be a misdirect to this because they don't do this to a main character like Jean-Luc.
Yeah.
You know, that would if they had, I guarantee you it would not have made 7 seasons in that. It would have to use another TV trope, jumped the shark.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to talk about the influence that Best of Both Worlds has on other Trek finales and other genre shows. Battlestar Galactica, Lost, Game of Thrones is a big one. And even now, people have been waiting longer than they had to wait for Best of Both Worlds, nearly 2 years for Hegemony Part 2 for Strange New Worlds. Talk about the influence on Trek and all these other shows that I think all of us have watched at one point or another.
I mean, yeah. I mean, like the cliffhanger has kind of really been, redefined in like a lot of like, TV after like, HBO and its Sopranos and that, and TV turned into more serialized and adult themed and that. But like this, still set that template for everything, right? Do we have the same effect with Battlestar if we don't have cliffhangers at the end of each season?
I don't think so.
No, it kept people coming back. It's like as much as I enjoyed the first season, if it had ended like on kind of like a hopeful, well, we'll see what happens note. No, it brought it heavy in that because it really needed to, right? And like say the entirety of Breaking Bad.
From what I've never watched Breaking Bad, but from what I've heard,
I find that stunning in that because like it had some of the best like cliffhangers. The cliffhanger for season 3 into 4, ooh, dude, because like Breaking Bad was a show that kind of it made it through its first season. It was on the bubble a bit. I think season 3 was probably the one that garnered the most viewership and redefined like where the series was going and how it was going to do that, and a lot of it was due to that cliffhanger for that one. So I'm no spoilers in that, but check out Breaking Bad, dude.
I have to at some point for sure. MC, how about you with either Trek finales or just other genre shows in sci-fi and pop culture?
Well, it was funny. We were talking about Buffy before the show started a little bit. And I really think that you can definitely see the DNA of this finale and a lot of the finales that they did on both Buffy and Angel, like in Becoming Part 2, when Buffy goes off after killing Angelus, and certainly when Buffy Summers, she saved the world a lot. And then going into Angel, when you have like Connor sinking Angel to the bottom of the ocean, there's a lot of stuff where you're having like your title character in just absolute peril or dead in one case that I don't think you get if you don't have the best of both worlds, especially for a lot of that 90s stuff where a lot of it does kind of have either the Next Generation or the Deep Space Nine model of episodic episodes, but then turn into like a longer arc.
Right.
I think that you get this. We want to have episodes that stand on their own, but also episodes that form an arc. And I think Best of Both Worlds is really kind of where we start to see that.
Yeah, 100%. I have to say, for me, going back to talking about Battlestar, I don't think that you have, especially with Ron Moore behind the helm, you don't have Pegasus parts 1 and 2 without the Best of Both Worlds. I would say that Pegasus has every blueprint possible from the Best of Both Worlds, right? You have, Pegasus showing up. It's a happy-go-lucky moment, right? Like, oh, look, we have a fleet. We have another Battlestar. Even though Best of Both Worlds does not start off very nice, right? Like a whole fucking colony is gone. But this, it's like, oh, but very quickly you find out kind of who Admiral Kane is. And by the time of that episode, you have Vipers from Galactica and Vipers from Pegasus coming at each other with Bear McCreary's amazing score, the da-da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da, and then to be fucking continued. You don't have that without Best of Both Worlds. And that, I think, is maybe a top 5 cliffhanger of all time.
You really don't. And like it's an interesting choice because like, Battlestar had very much clearly defined like, their main villain, the Cylons, versus the humans and that. So it kind of serviced the same purpose that they were trying to do with the Borg in that 2 episode arc. Introduce an enemy who, you don't see coming, who was way darker than the one you were actually fighting. This was the thing with the Borg in that it's like they were trying to plan out since season 1 something that could, that a villain that defines this iteration of Star Trek. They failed with the Ferengis big time. They were supposed to be the big thing, but didn't happen.
And the Romulans.
It's always too expensive there. Yeah. Again, the concept of the Borg and the way they were introduced, I think, best of both worlds, and that I think it'll continue to shape a lot of people's the way they approach television, the way they write for it, the way they direct it.
I mean, they do it, and that's our next topic. We don't really need to talk about it, but I think it's important to just mention that it's still referenced in TV writing rooms today. You see the blueprint of it in a lot of these streaming shows that have big cliffhangers because they want you to keep paying for those streaming services and come back. So it's super important. I mean, and it's funny how that actually kind of became a blueprint for streaming too, when this was so far before streaming, right? But now it's like, here we are.
And there were completely different models of television.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I want to talk about the Borg and coming from Q-Who to Best of Both Worlds and becoming really terrifying. They're no longer just this threat that Q toys with them a little bit with, which still leads to loss of life, but they are literally in Best of Both Worlds an unstoppable force. And if we're being completely honest, they get very lucky. What do you think about the evolution from that episode to Best of Both Worlds, Hawk?
So this is, I did a deep dive on this last night. I wanted to be a bit prepared in that. So just to go back a bit, Maurice Hurley wrote Q-Who and that intended this race to be an insectoid race until budget.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. Restrictions said, no, make it human, do something in that. And that fell onto Dorinda Rice Wood, the costume designer. She had to come up with the new villain that would define the TNG era. And she had a week to get it ready for camera, which is crazy. A quote from her: they wanted a new bad guy and they wanted to be a cyborg. They wanted something that was cold and like an automaton. They all looked kind of alike, but they didn't have emotions. That's what was going to be scary about it. I was tired of the futuristic, clean stainless steel imagery of the time, interested in texture, blah, blah, blah. Their body parts would wear out and they would replace them and shit. This, it's crazy because I've seen some concept designs in that she did. And that was the task in that, to make them look like, something we hadn't seen before. We all been kind of exposed to, like the hybrid, a human hybrid, like robots in sci-fi and that. Most prominently Doctor Who. Doctor Who gave us 2 outings in that with the Daleks and the Cybermen. So it fell upon her to create a look that was going to define them and fulfill the purposes of the character. And what she did was fantastic. She was influenced a lot by H.R. Geiger. We see an Alien, but you should see his other work is crazy stuff. But the tubing design came from that, and it was kind of further illustrated by Rick Sternbach. He was asked for input into the designs, and he took what she did and helped shape and refine it with the implants and a kind of a uniform suit that each actor would wear. Let's see where else here. By the time they got to BOBW, the costumes had evolved. That signature outfits of Borg we had seen in Q-Who. The implants, the tubings. The tubings are actually what helped to distinguish each of them, right? Because they were all different designs and that. And the concept was that the tubes were basically there in each part and that, because whoever they assimilated in that needed tubing and needed those implants going in different directions. It's a little hard to describe, but
no, I know what you're trying to say though.
Yeah. Yeah, but it continues on. I noticed in the set when watching it, you can see that same concept in the background design of the inside of the Borg cube, and that sewers were actually kind of a big influence on her, not just in the color and the look and that, but also you can see it in the background and that these pipings that go in behind the alcoves and that, and just seem to just snake and connect and go on forever, right? But then when it got to Best of Both Worlds and the idea of presenting Jean-Luc as Locutus and that, then they needed something more. Michael Westmore, this is a quote from him. My son Michael, who did all the Borg electronics in the eyes and the head, found this little laser that was only 1 inch long. We mounted it on Patrick Stewart as Locutus. There's that scene at the end of the first part of the Best of Both Worlds where Patrick turns his head and looks directly into the camera with the laser. We had no idea what was going to happen. Boy, the phone rang. Rick Berman saw it and said, "Oh my God, what an effect."
Oh, that's awesome.
A little bit about the cube. As we know, the cube was first shown in Q Who. That one was the physical form came from Richard James, but it was built by Kim Bailey and Starlight Effects. It became the template for the cube we see in Best of Both Worlds, which was designed by Gary Hutzel and Dennis Horter. It was actually a smaller iteration than the previous one. Quote from Herzl. The Borg explosion in that shot was, of course, very important. It was a pivotal moment in the show, and it had to be really big. So we had all set out realizing we needed a spectacular explosion. Dan Brownfield was our effects person on the show at the time, and he pulled out all the stops, brought out everything. But as usual, we spent all the money on the pyrotechnics, and there was no money left to build the ship. The ship had to be built. There was no money. I had to build the ship. So the ship that was used for the pyrotechnics was only about 2 feet square, as I recall. So Dennis and I ended up sitting on the table and taking basic model kit parts, stripping them off of all those little parts off, taking the little plastic frames that they came on and gluing them on the side of this box. And then spray painting it, looking at it and sticking more stuff on, spray painting it some more until finally it looked like a Borg ship. It was this spectacular explosion, beautifully executed. We got it the first take.
Oh, man. That's crazy.
I know.
Like
the fact that it came out of a week, this iconic design for them. And then just people started adding on.
Think about like all the money and technology that goes into all these like sets and shit that we see on television today, and like they're there with like no budget and built like one of the most iconic sci-fi ships out of fucking model parts. Like it blows my mind. It's so cool.
It's that idea about what do they say? Necessity is the mother of invention, and like back then, everything had to be physical. Everything was physically. The fact that it looked a little, once it's all based around concept and tone and the dread they created every time they showed that ship on screen, right?
Yes. Can you guys still hear me, by the way?
Hello?
Uh-oh. Hello? Uh-oh. I am frozen. Can you guys hear me? Uh-oh. Oh, they're frozen. Okay. Oh, look, it's the Defiant. Can you still hear me? Uh-oh. All right. No Hawk or no MC. Zoom is reconnecting. Here we go.
I guess the next part I was going to talk about was music. We were talking to,
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we
can
hear you now.
That was weird. They actually couldn't hear. They could hear me still, but they couldn't hear you. I don't like Zoom.
Oh,
something happened with Zoom. It was really weird. Yeah. Anyway, hello, we're back.
That was terrifying.
That was terrifying because I've had a lot of technical issues today. Oh dear God. Where were we, Hawk? You were going to talk about. Well, I want to give MC a chance, even though I'm sure that's probably impossible to follow up on, but sorry, your opinion on just that evolution from Q Who, where we have the Borg, but we really don't know about like assimilation yet, right? it's more of a scare tactic from Q, and then to becoming like this big evil, almost assimilates Earth baddie in Best of Both Worlds.
Everything about the Borg really kind of just jumps up in this episode. It goes from just basically like your zombies in a dark corridor from Q-Who. And in this, you really see them as a galactic threat. Like they're heading towards Earth. In Q-Who, it was this, granted it was deadly, but Q sent them to the Delta Quadrant, and you kind of knew that Q was going to return them eventually because, of course, this isn't Voyager. They're not going to be stuck in the Delta Quadrant for the rest of the series. But the Borg are able to get all of the way to Earth in this. They actually breached the Mars defenses.
Mars and Jupiter, I think, both. Yeah.
So, the Federation is being directly
the core is at risk, and it's like that's also something we never really saw in Trek to that point.
It's not just a single ship that's in danger. This is all of the ships, and we see in this that there's a massive number of ships that are lost in this, and it will end up affecting things later on. And the Borg, we see them evolve from having Locutus become a Borg. I mean, I mentioned zombies before. You think about the whole, could you kill a loved one if they became a zombie? This is the first time in Trek that we're actually confronted with that idea. We did not have that in Q-Who. There were certainly red shirts that got assimilated, but they weren't lingered on at all. And in this, we actually see one of the pillars of Star Trek, of the Federation, turned into a Borg. And the decision has to come up, do we kill this man? Is it kinder to kill him? What's going to happen? And I think there's still an argument to be made as, was it kinder? Because certainly the
psychological aftermath, right?
The psychological, yeah.
Yeah.
What's it been, 30, 40 years until Picard season 3 that it's still affecting him? Yeah, so there's just everything about the Borg changed. It went from the small, tiny threat to just galactic-wide terror. Yeah, absolutely. I want to go back to what Hawk was talking about real quick, and Michelle in the chat writes regarding what Hawk was talking about. The effects really hold up from the episode. Love practical effects. I mean, you watch this, especially with the remaster. There's nothing that stands out that's like, oh look, this looks cheesy, this looks bad. It's still like it's movie quality. It's so good. One of the things I like about hearing about them kit bashing to create things is that it really does fit the Borg because they cannibalize other species.
Yeah.
That's an amazing analogy, actually.
Yeah, it is. It really is. Hawk, you just talked a lot about the visual. I want to talk about the audio design of not just the Borg cube, the Borg themselves, the collective, and I think we'd be remiss if we didn't talk about the score, because this is, I think, the first episode of TNG that really has almost a cinematic score to go along with it. And I don't think it would have been the same episode had that not been a part of it.
No, it's an amazing arrangement, right? In particular, in the way Ron Jones decided to compose it, and the arrangement went with real strings and a synthesizer, which is assumed the vocal choral parts in that you hear in it, and it's a great little metaphor about the Borg, and that it's like nature versus technology. I think that that's one of the main reasons it stands out. It is definitely a bolder score than you're used to hearing for like a televised series and that. Even though like Ron Jones, he was on from season 1 to 4. This was that score that stuck out. That dun dun dun.
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. It never leaves you. And unfortunately, I was reading this is kind of one of the turning points in that for Ron Jones in his career on Star Trek and that, because it started to rub against Rick Berman's ideas about how music in a television series should work.
Fucking Berman.
Yeah. Too noticeable was the critique.
Well, that's stupid.
I know. There's a quote that goes along with it. On StarTrek.com, they did, I guess Rick Berman did an AMA, and he was asked about his thoughts about Ron Jones, and they asked about the behind the scenes about why he left. From Rick Berman, as I believe I said at the time to somebody, he was doing the kind of scoring that was calling attention to itself. That doesn't mean, as some people have interpreted it, that I wanted dull, boring music. What it means is that the music is there to enhance the scene that is going. The scene is not there to enhance the music. And Ron's stuff was getting big and somewhat flamboyant. It was a decision that Peter Lauritsen and I made that was just a simple moving on to other composers. I think Ron was a perfectly good composer. I don't think he was in the same ballpark as Dennis McCarthy or Jay Chataway, who we used a great deal at the time.
How idiotic is that statement? Like, really?
I watched this episode several weeks ago because I had to write a Trexperts quiz for it. And then basically immediately afterwards, I watched, like the next episode I watched, I was watching Data Lore with my partner. And going from watching this to a first season episode, first season is so small, just in terms of all of the aesthetics, but the music was especially noticeable for me. Mm-hmm. So it's like, there's nothing wrong with grandiose.
What kills me is saying something like it being too noticeable is like, we're talking about the best of both worlds here. That's like saying that Portals in Endgame, Avengers Endgame, was too noticeable. Like if you just had a basic score for that, does Cap say Avengers Assemble like hit the same? Because I can't think of anything else but Portals playing in Endgame, right? Like it's mm-hmm. such a ridiculous statement. The whole point is to have a score be noticeable, and yes, compliment, but like music is such an important part of film and television. To say something like that about this episode specifically, I mean, it kind of just confirms everything that we always talk about with Rick Berman, right? Like the dude just does not understand.
No, it's like saying John Williams was a little too verbose.
In this episode, when you've got space battles, when you've got these intense emotional moments, these are bombastic moments that need bombastic music to back it up. There's tons of times in Trek where you have your quieter moments and you have quieter score. Best of Both Worlds isn't one of them.
Yeah. And in particular, the way it contrasts with the scene in that, because as they get the image of the Borg cube up on the view screen in that, Picard almost turns in this very quiet tone, almost a resigned like nature to it, and that turns and says, alert Starfleet, we have engaged the Borg. You don't have that music. Does it? If that music not being there takes away from the emotional impact in that,
Mm-hmm.
Even Michelle, sorry, go ahead.
Michelle in the chat said the music was fantastic and TOS certainly had noticeable music. Yeah, like I take this and raise you the fight music from Amok Time.
Oh my God. One of the biggest moments in this episode, and we're going to talk about this a lot more in a second, is assimilation and seeing Jean-Luc assimilated, and it's a horror moment, right? It's terrifying. It's that sci-fi meets psychological terror moment. I want to get your guys' take on this. And this first time, MC, you brought up a good point earlier. We didn't see assimilation in Q-Who, but those people that got taken off of the ship definitely got assimilated by the Borg. So not the first time that, people from the Enterprise were assimilated, but the first time that we see it. And of all people, it's Jean-Luc Picard, and you have the horror of it is you have the rest of the ensemble, the cast like Worf and Beverly making audible gasps, right? Or giving a look to the screen to be like, oh, this is scary. This is bad. Hawk, what do you think about this?
Yeah. I mean, Q did not do a good job of like really like telling us about like what assimilation in the Borg was like, I think Borg babies was definitely a red herring in that, because it allowed them to remain like a separate entity from like, human beings and that, that they were an alien race and that, look, they have babies and that. No, they just go and they just keep picking it up, different cultures, different people and that, we know that they were interested in technology and that, but like, they didn't really hammer home the part about like, they're interested in us and every other like life form in the galaxy. And this is where Best of Both Worlds, really hammers the point home, is that they took the best of Starfleet. It's like what we, because like at that point, like Picard, he always he symbolized like the best of Starfleet about what it could be. It's like the captain that that we'd all want to serve under, and then the Borg just snatched him like it was nothing.
Yeah,
took him and made him one of their own, and him coming out and that, and we have at that time we know Patrick Stewart's lovely gravitas and voice in that, it's like could recite Shakespearean sonnets and we're there and that. And now to hear him very coldly and plainly just stating that their life was over, and in the way they enhance the voice, with that just that slight little, I don't know what, like a ring modulation or like a reverb in that,
probably a little bit of a reverb. Yeah.
It just hammered home in that this was how robotic and how not there he was. That like it could be any of us.
Yeah. MC, I want to keep going on the psychological horror and terror of this, because the Borg are also a metaphor, right, for loss of identity, resistance. We're having a discussion in the real world right now with technological domination and AI. How do you feel about Borg kind of as a metaphor, not more like terror we see of Jean-Luc losing his identity?
Well, I mean, first of all, they do build it up so slowly. Like, I mean, when do we see the Borg ever fold somebody's clothes for them?
Oh my God, right?
And the fact that it's Beverly is the first person to see Picard, and not even fully changed, because we do have the
full assimilation,
several different phases of Locutus. And it's at the end of this episode that we get like the main big shot of Locutus changed, but it's not even until the second part that we get him fully assimilated and we get the moment of the single tear going down his face.
God.
This whole idea of the Borg and their assimilation, it's this, they're so alien, but they're us. Even most of the Borg that are not humans still look human, just with cybernetics put onto them. It makes it terrifying that the Borg are able to tear people down and just turn them into, while they don't look insectoid, they certainly act insectoid.
Yes. Yeah, that was one of the things that actually survived from the original concept, and that it was like Hurley wrote the episode in that. Ronald D. Moore and somebody else, I can't remember the name of that, but they were basically like, they synthesized it down. Okay, we can't have insectoids and that, too expensive and that, but we like this idea of a collective.
Mm-hmm. And while we don't get so much into this yet, because Picard got very lucky in that they assimilated him in a way that they didn't need to remove any of his parts, which I always found very funny with him with that extra long arm. And I was like, that's convenient for him. But certainly we have 7 of 9 and Hugh, who end up having fake eyes.
Yes.
Because, And so much of this happens with the XBs that Borg parts replaced their own, and then they had to get new stuff. And we have since found out that even though Beverly was able to take care of a lot of Picard's stuff, he's always still XB, and it affects his later son. So it's this incredibly violating thing. And just, I would be remiss if I didn't bring up family.
Yeah.
Because, well, first of all, that is a huge thing that they carry it over not only through the cliffhanger, but into the very next episode where we find out just how traumatized by all of this Picard is. And it is such a personal bodily assault. And I think that you could equate it to, you know, an essay.
Yeah. No, you could. Absolutely. Yeah. Because they do. They violate. It's a complete body violation, right? Like just all over. Yeah. No, very, very well said, MC. And I want to go back to something that you just mentioned about Bev being the first one to see it. Michelle writes, Data actually holds Bev back. It's a really important moment, especially considering Picard season 3, you know, that she is the first person to see him. That's
a very cool kind of.
And that was Beverly's first encounter with Borg too, because she wasn't in.
That's right. She wasn't in season 2. That's right. I want to keep talking about Picard and becoming Locutus. I had to get the Borg Funko sets.
I nearly got out my old action figure because I've been putting them out.
Nice.
And I found my Locutus.
Nice. Hawk, you were talking about how Patrick Stewart has this great, you know, Shakespearean background and the acting, and then one of his finest moments turns out to be in TNG and almost very monotone, but it still hits so hard, and that's the I am Locutus of Borg, and I want to play that clip for everybody real quick. So let's watch that.
I am Locutus of Borg. Resistance is futile. Your life, as it has been, is over.
The way the whole scene is draped out and that, it's like the way the lighting is kind of, it seems a little rickety in that. You keep switching on and off. The contrast, that was one of the biggest things, like for the Borg, was that kind of contrast between like the armor, the just like that monotone looking armor and implants that they wear versus like the face. That was one of the things that survived, like from the original concepts design. And that initially it was going to be like like the face would appear out of like kind of like a pure matte black surround for the armor. And that, no, the fact that like his face is very highlighted in this clip. And yes, it was definitely reverb. It gives that tone to the voice that it's maybe coming from like far away or another room in that, but like whatever it is, that voice is it's something else.
The
mechanical nature of it, and to take away all his inflection, all the drama from his tone and the way, like he's the man.
He is. He really is. MC, what did you think about Patrick Stewart's performance here the first time we see him as Locutus?
It's so good. It takes a fantastic actor to be able to handle a moment like that, because it is so monotoned and so measured that it could seem boring. Mm-hmm. But it is chilling the way it's done. It is just ice cold, just chipping away, and it is completely perfect. And I I think that this whole arc really does give like Patrick Stewart's like two best performances, and it is on the two far ends of the scale. It is this scene, and it is the one of him in the mud in Family.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes. I just have to say, like, from my point, seeing this for the first time and seeing his performance, and it's what's interesting about it is it just doesn't get old. No matter how many times you watch him say, "I am Locutus of Borg," you get goosebumps. It's impossible not to. And I think, Hawk, what you were saying with the way the background is, like with the lighting and the laser and seeing the fact that it's like what MC was saying, it's not the full assimilation yet. There's still some Jean-Luc there. He still has, "Hi, Kang, how are you?" He still has, he's got pink skin. They haven't made him pale yet. So it's like, oh shit, it's Jean-Luc. But then Michelle's point is great here. I think what makes it all work so well is that you could see in Picard's eyes his sorrow and fear as he looks at his crew and is ready to destroy them all, which is so true. And that's my next point, right? I talked about this a few minutes ago, that emotional impact and what makes this work and what makes it terrifying and horrific is that the crew does a great job just using their faces to act, like their facial reaction to see their captain weaponized. Hawk, like how important was it for Bev, for Worf, for Riker? Even Wes makes a really great, like Will Wheaton makes a great face at the helm. Like how important was that for the rest of the cast?
Like it was massively important. And I rewatching this, I kind of realized, I mentioned in the chat last time we were watching this, an alternate title for these whole arc could have been A Tale of Two Captains.
Yeah.
Because of, but like with Picard, I kind of realized that like, the encounter in Q Who had already done the damage, right?
Yeah.
He was so, this was a moment he had been anticipating and fearful of. And when it finally came, he found himself lost, he was wandering around like, the 10 forward and that, it's like him doing how the captain walks the ship and that before.
Not expecting to be alive the next day, basically. Yeah,
exactly. He went in with all that fear into this encounter. And it's so interesting that like, we note the humanity still left in his eyes as he is Locutus and delivering this message. An alternate message he could have been delivering was, "I'm so sorry I failed you."
Yeah. Oh God. Wow. Yeah. Great point. MC, how important is it to have the background, basically speechless, but emotionally acting so well?
You absolutely need every single shot of these people because the crew of the Enterprise are a family, some of them more literally than others. But we see these people week after week, and they are the only people that we see them with. And we see all the way up until Picard season 3 that they are each other's family. And in this moment, they're seeing Dad turned into this thing. And it's this chilling moment. Bev obviously has romantic feelings for him. And it's not just this, what's happened to Picard, but it's the very real possibility that they might die because they nearly died in Q Who. They would have if it wasn't for Q. And we also see that in alternate timelines, the Enterprise does get destroyed.
Yes.
So it's by a very, very small grace of God that they get through this. And they're feeling all of that in this moment. And they do manage to show all of that silently. And it's beautiful.
Yeah, it absolutely is. MC, sorry. Go ahead, Hawk. Yes, please.
The hurt in Worf's voice when he says he
is a Borg. Yeah. Oh, one of the best lines in both episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the delivery. Yeah. MC, you've done a great job all night, kind of harkening back to, or not but flashing forward to the ramifications and consequences, the trauma of what happens with Locutus in a lot of the media that we've been taking in for the past 35 years. First, the very next episode, like you mentioned, in Family. We haven't really talked about First Contact yet. You know, Picard's whole captain's log, the day we've been dreading, is finally here. The Borg have returned, and they've set, you know, of course, right for Earth. You know, we have the ramifications for that. Again, almost assimilate Earth, but like MC just said, by the grace of God, they get caught in the temporal wake of the Borg sphere. Like, all of these right things have to keep happening for this crew. And then going back to the trauma and the consequences, I mean, Picard just never escapes the Borg. He couldn't step on the artifact without having panic attacks. He, you know, when he sees the Borg Queen in season 2 and he just goes, you know, the effect it has him. And then finally Picard season 3 to pass off the biggest Borg trap, you know, this genetic code that made, you know, young people get assimilated, including his son, who becomes basically Locutus too. It really just carries this entire crew for the next 35 years. Keep going. Whoever wants to go on that first.
I mean, where do you go from there?
I know it's so like we always complain about too much Borg, right?
Yeah.
But it's also a great story.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that, you know, like I said, Q who set the tone for it in that first, you know, it's amplified a bit, you know, with like what we know about Picard in the past and his trauma and that, you know, for him, like Q who revealed, like, you know, it's like, oh my God, I don't know anything to him. It was probably his moment of biggest failure and biggest reduction in his, I guess, power, you know, and his self-image about what he was capable of doing and accomplishing. You know, he was met with utter failure to the point where he had to beg Q to make it stop. Yeah, to say, I need you. That just carried with him, and I think it was explored pretty beautifully in that, in like, you know, season 1 and that with the panic attacks, obviously Family. The fact that, like, you know, season 3 he discovers that he's, you know, not, you know, he wasn't just traumatized by them, he's also, you know, a carrier. That's another angle of the Borg we never really talked about, is the Borg as a representation of disease. You know, be it like cancer, be it, you know, for the 80s and 90s, of course, it's like there's a very powerful AIDS metaphor.
Oh, I was about to say, yeah. Yes,
right?
AIDS, huge. Yeah. MC?
Well, there's something that Picard season 1 introduces that was completely new, and that is the concept of the XBs. We never really think of Picard as anything but he was briefly a Borg, but then he's Picard again. He's fine. He's human. No, he's not. He is an XB. And that is something that does get brought up in Picard, and that's what ends up affecting Jack, the fact that he is something that's different. And, you know, like I was saying, how Seven and Hugh and all of these people had limbs, body parts taken off of them. Picard got off very light in that case, that he didn't have that taken off of him. But I think that Picard had such a strong will and there was a need for the Borg to have Picard as more intelligent than the regular drone.
And maybe a whole as well, MC? Like a whole person instead of, like, you know, matching him, you know? Yeah.
It is brought up in First Contact that the Borg Queen kind of wanted a companion.
Yes.
In Locutus. So it is kind of psychologically tearing him apart rather than physically tearing him apart more than anything. And I think that's why it has these massive more psychological than physical. And the trauma, I mean, I do make jokes about them, you know, carrying it on too long, but of course, this is a deeply scarring event that would never heal. And frankly, I judge Starfleet a little bit for having them put Picard right back on ship.
Again, poor mental health policies all around.
Someone made a rather harsh comment on our Facebook on your clip, MC, which I couldn't fully disagree with. It's like, honestly, if Starfleet really, like, did the right thing, Jean-Luc probably would have been honorably discharged, right?
Absolutely. Like it's,
And I said, maybe that's a little bit harsh, but I have to agree with you. There's absolutely, I feel like we talk about this every time we talk about this episode in some form. But the fact that he's put right back into command, I mean, one, from a story point of view, I think you miss a big opportunity to explore Captain Riker a little bit more. But two, just from a like, dude, you got to give him a few weeks off. Like, just because his ship is getting like, not refurbished. Refitted. Doesn't mean he doesn't need to be in command of the refit. Like, send him to psychology, send him to fucking
mud wrestling with your brother's not enough.
No, send him to Ryza, do something. But like, to put him right back in command is psychotic of Starfleet.
Yeah.
But this is something that Starfleet always does.
Well, I mean,
it always
to play the devil's advocate, and they did just have like the fleet basically wiped out.
No, you're absolutely right.
Their most seasoned commanders and captains and crewmen, and that it's like, so at that time they were at a deficit for qualified personnel, and obviously he would have hid how much he was hurt.
100%. Yeah, I can't talk about that. Oh, I almost spoiled something upcoming for Strange New Worlds. But yeah, like he probably did pass the psyche evals, right? Like he had to get through them and he passed them, but you could play, it's like James Bond in Skyfall. Like he maybe passed those, but not really. Oh man. We kind of already talked about, the individualism versus collective. I want to get to Riker at the helm, right? Because this is a big episode for Jonathan Frakes as well. At the helm, the struggles with being at the helm, and just his growth, right? This is someone who has turned down 4 commands at this point. He is that loyal XO hoping to get a shot at the chair, not another ship's chair, the flagship chair. Then he's thrust into it, right? In the worst possible circumstances. How big is this for Riker, and how much of a struggle for him is it, Hawk?
Like that first episode, of part 1, I mean, we see him throwing off his game a little bit, It's like, being put in that, that put on the spot like that, it's like there's a big threat, and now, a bright, headstrong, young commander is, eyeing his position in that and putting the work in, maybe going around his, going around him to try and get it done, like, beaming down to the planet early. Forgivable little lapse.
Early bird gets the worm, eh?
Exactly. And it makes him question himself a bit. It's like, why am I still here in that? Why haven't I moved on? Part of it probably that he still, is, thinking that at some point, maybe I'll get the Enterprise and that, but mostly because I think he just finds himself like he's happy and comfortable in that. And that gets thrown back in his face too. You're too comfortable in your spot. But then again, like he's in a place where he wants to be, and there's questions about like, if it's just duty or if it's, he's getting a little soft and he likes it, the family and the friends and everything around.
Yeah. MC.
Yeah. I think my favorite moment in regards to all of this is when Riker is talking to Troy about it. It's this very subtle moment where he's talking about his ambition and all of the things that he gave up to succeed in Starfleet. And he gestures to her just very subtly. And it's like basically saying, I gave up being with you in order to move ahead in the Starfleet. And now I'm stagnated here. And I can kind of understand like the whole Riker being the cocky guy who thinks that he can immediately jump in on as captain of the flagship. That does kind of fit him. And also there is the whole idea of he wants to stay with the people that he cares about, because I don't think that that's something that Riker has really cared about in Starfleet before. I think that he's been close to people. Certainly that comes up in other episodes, but it's not the same family situation that we have going on. So the idea of leaving all of these people that he's very comfortable with and which is the ship that he's supposed to go on, the Melbourne?
The Melbourne, which
Yeah.
gets destroyed.
It gets thoroughly destroyed. Yeah. And there is a moment where he's just like, oh shit, that was going to be my ship.
Yeah.
So, and it's not as nice a ship as the Enterprise, but sometimes you got to build up to that. So there's, I don't know, this idea of him being both complacent and also ambitious at the same time, that I think it's this interesting dichotomy that's going on. And having Shelby show up and be really ambitious is
Well, we're going to talk about it in a second. Just to more of your point, right? Like Maggie Light says, I think he didn't want to be captain because he didn't want to sit in the chair yet. He wanted to lead those away missions. He was ambitious in that sense. Riker's always liked danger, right? He also likes sleeping around the alien races. Like there's a privilege to being the XO and not the captain. And I think that does go back to talking about maybe being a little bit stagnant. And then Kung writes a really good point, which is going to lead right into our next clip. I could see Hansen's point, though. Picard is such a good captain. You logically want to rotate first officers through to be trained by Jean-Luc before they take command. And that's a good point. It is a great point, which leads me to one of the greatest quotes from this episode. "You're in my way," by Shelby. And we are going to watch that clip real quick, and then we are going to talk about it. My mouse is on my other computer. This is so fun. Here we go. Let's watch this clip.
May I speak frankly, sir?
By all means.
You're in my way.
Really? How terrible for you.
All you know how to do is play it safe. I suppose that's why someone like you sits in the shadow of a great man for as long as you have, passing up one command after another. Proceed to deck 8.
And the way she just reactivates the turbo lift after she's done is just like, I'm not going to let you get another word in, even though he does. But it's like the point has been made, and there's that power dynamic. She's going to be a captain. We know from Picard season 3, she's going to be one of the most important people in Starfleet, like a big admiral, right? Like he is in her way a bit. Like she's a bitch about it, but she has a right to. Like if you're not going to leave, I'm going to find a way to make you leave because I want to be on this ship. And you know what? Maybe I'll even be captain of this ship before you. Hawk, what do you think about this power dynamic with Shelby and Riker?
Like it's the thing is that like I don't even think she was trying to be mean about it, you know. I think it's one like Starfleet commander and that talking to another Starfleet commander, and at that point, you know, yes, you know, she wants a shot at the Enterprise and that, but also she's giving him some really damn good advice, and all he can come up with is like pretty much a snarky retort. She says everything without any passion, without any inflection of rancor or that. She just tells him, "You're in my way." She's like, "You're just, you know, you are stagnant. You're just sitting in the shadow of a great man." When, like, as you said, like, you know, it's like rotation of commanders, and that trains more commanders to be captains. You know, it's like you're just standing in my way at that because you're soft and you're complacent. I feel like it's a one officer dressing down another officer. You know?
Yeah. Yep. MC, how about you? What do you think about this?
I think Shelby is amazing.
Yes.
I love her. I don't think that I wouldn't call her a bitch.
No, maybe a poor choice of words on my part. Yeah, no, poor choice of word on my part. But for some, like that's how a lot of people have described her over the years. Like it's a bitchy tone, but like we think about it now, it's not really a bitchy tone. It's a very powerful tone.
It's forthright.
Forthright, yes. Forthright is much better.
Which is exactly what you need in this situation. You don't need to pussyfoot around. Riker is dragging his heels. Everybody knows it. And he has admirals, captains, everybody trying to tell him what to do. And Shelby is somebody who is basically on his level. And she's telling him, listen, this is how things are. And I like that forthright, right? For her, that Riker's trouble for her. And it's not that she dislikes Riker. It's that professionally that he's in her way. And how else is she going to actually say that if she doesn't just say it outright? And by doing it that way, by being so forthright and powerful and trying to get in the last word, she's showing that I can be in this second in command on the flagship under Jean-Luc Picard.
Yeah. So much that later on he does even make her first officer when he's promoted, which is a big step. Yum Yum Pod has a great point about this too. Riker just can't handle when someone pushes back against his bullshit. It's absolutely true. We see this in other episodes as well. You know, Riker is my all-time favorite Star Trek character. But the more I watch Best of Both Worlds and other episodes where he gets pushed back against, the other person is usually right, Shelby included. Like Shelby, every time I watch this, just grows on me more and more because she's ambitious. And if I wanted a job like that, you know, I don't hold my tongue very much. I would speak my mind, and she does. And Jesse also brings up a good point. She's a woman in a man's world. She needs to be direct and can't tiptoe around bullshit because otherwise people won't take her seriously, especially in the fucking 80s and 90s writers' rooms. So it's a really,
there's no room for women in your world of starships.
No. Oh God. No, it's a great dynamic. I love watching them on the screen so much. I think we hit all these points talking about it right now, so we're just going to move right on to our next section, performances, right, that also make this episode so iconic. We haven't talked much yet about Whoopi as Guinan playing just a very major part in this episode that maybe doesn't get talked about as much, right? Both with Jean-Luc and Hawk, like you were talking about, him making his captain's walk before the dawn, right? And that conversation, you know, about how humanity will, as long as you're there, there's a few of you, you'll always come out on top. Later on, I think when we really find out how important and how massive Jean-Luc and Guinan's relationship is, right? It goes beyond love. It goes beyond, I forget the full line, but you know, it goes
beyond friendship, beyond family.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I will let him go. It's such a big moment. Let's talk about Whoopi's performance.
Yeah, both her turns in this were fantastic because she's always there with what that person needs to hear at that particular moment, right? You know, sometimes she can be a little elusive in her meaning and that, and people have to catch on to that. But no, with Picard, she knew exactly like where his head was at. It's like you're looking at the destruction of your people and that. He's like, I was there. You know what? It's like she said, humanity, even if you don't, humanity will survive, you know, because obviously Picard thinks bigger than himself and that, not just, you know, he's not afraid to die in that, but he's afraid about not being able to stop this. And she says, you might not be able to, but that's okay. Because even though they will try, but, you know, they will not succeed. Yeah. And conversely, with Riker, she gave him exactly what he needed to hear at that point, you know. It's like he had convinced himself he was ready to let him go, right? But that scene in the conference room where he's just pacing around, he's in charge right now in that. Remember how his hands just rest on the back of the big chair at the front of the conference table?
Well, right. And even before that, when he walks in and pauses and looks at the chair and says, "What would you do?" Yeah. You know, it's like he's still looking for his guidance when he's not there.
He can't take that spot, you know? Yeah.
MC, how about you?
As he wrote in the outline, Guinan plays a major part. But what makes it so great is I believe it's only the two scenes that Guinan is.
It is.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's how impactful these two scenes are. They're two relatively short scenes, but they are so important because the first one is before the battle when she's talking to Picard, and the second one is kind of mid-battle when she's talking to Riker. And she's trying to give Picard hope. And then when she's talking to Riker, she's trying to give him permission. Because Riker is struggling with this whole idea that I brought up before, that killing somebody with the face of somebody that you care about, somebody that you trust. And Guinan is telling Riker that he has to do that because if he hesitates at all, then the Borg are going to win because the Borg know everything that the Enterprise knows because they know what Jean-Luc knows. And it's just this great moment with her when she's bursting in and she's saying, I'm used to having the captain's ear. And I don't think that Riker has ever had Guinan talk to him like that before.
No.
I mean, she's always, wonderful and giving advice to everybody on the ship. But there is that special relationship between her and Picard. And this is as close as she gets to showing that with anybody else, because one, it's about Picard, and just in the situation, basically Guinan is trying to let Riker be Picard as much as possible.
Yeah. Wow. Well said.
And it works, with Riker. Like I said, this is, that I love that how she gave him permission, not just to put Picard aside, but also it in a way it gave him permission to be like, that man that, he wished he was still back in episode 1, right? Bold, innovative, willing to take huge risks, which is the captain he needed to be at that point. It's interesting that we talked about how he was supposed to be on the Melville at that point. Imagine if he had taken that promotion and that before all this had happened.
Oh man.
Working with a new crew, people he didn't, people obviously were trained for the jobs, but didn't have that bond that he had forged with the rest of that crew at that point.
Yeah.
Different story.
Well, as Q points out on Voyager, if it's not for Riker, the Borg do take over the Alpha Quadrant.
Right. For play, I'm so glad you just said that, MC, because what's really great about this episode is it shows the poker game, right? And how Riker is a master bluffer, right? And he gives the ultimate bluff to Locutus, right? It's so good by separating the bridge, looking like they're going to go to battle, but like sneaking out to actually get him. Locutus is never going to expect that. It's so well done. I really enjoy that. Yummy on Pod made me laugh when you were talking, Hawk. Riker is just used to flirting with Guinan, and I was going to think like their one interaction, we get that scene where like Wesley's having girl problems and like that's right. And like they're flirting and it's just like, shut up, kid. Keep going. Tell you. Yes. It's so good. I want to talk about, even though we just had a whole section on her, I want to talk about her some more. Elizabeth Dennehy as Shelby, Commander Shelby, because she really does do a great job of showing that she's career driven. She's bold, an underrated character, in my opinion. Like Shelby, and like, I always think after I finished watching these episodes, which is a lot, why didn't we ever see Shelby again? Because she puts in Elizabeth Dennehy puts such a good performance into this episode. Hawk.
Yeah, I don't know why we never saw her again. And that she would have been an easy one to pull back into the series, and that for maybe even another Borg episode at some point in that. But like she was off to do some pretty big things after like that. She was the one basically tasked with rebuilding the fleet. Nor was tasked, but I would love to see another interaction. I don't know why she wasn't back, but no, she killed it and everything in that, and especially like from going from episode 1 and that where it's like we get this impression of her and that the hot, the driven go-getter and that, it's like after, puts her in a bit of a villain role in that because, they think, oh, she's after Riker's chair. But no, episode 2, it's like, it's same Shelby in that, but like, adapting to the situation. And I love the interaction between her and Riker in engineering and that. It's like, I realized at that point, Riker adapted his relationship to her, that he both after that dressing down and everything, it's like they both say, okay, square deal, like moving forward, it's like I'm just here to help. That's all I want to do. I might be more useful to you as a first officer, but hey, you know what, you're in charge now.
Put me where you need me.
Exactly.
MC.
Well, as for bringing Shelby back for a Borg episode, correct me if I'm wrong, TNG only does 2 more Borg stories, don't they?
They do iBorg.
They do iBorg and Descent.
Yep, that's it. Yeah. I mean, it would have been maybe a good, like, I don't think Descent would have worked, but I think having her in iBorg would have been a really unique situation.
Interesting.
That might have been interesting. Borg, we'll have to talk about it another time. It is a very intimate episode,
Yeah.
so I think it might have been hard to fit
True.
her into it. And then if you think about it, Deep Space Nine, no Borg episodes at all. So
Yeah. Well,
if you
at
wanted
that
to
point,
bring her
they-
in relation to the Borg, I think that there's very little opportunity for you to do that. Could have brought her in for other things because I think she's definitely somebody that could have worked on the Defiant.
Yeah, the Defiant, the Titan, you know. Yeah, very
I'm
interesting.
just trying to picture her in Iborg in that. Does she become more of a villain in that episode? Because like, Picard is intent on like, using Q to carry out, a plan.
The
to
virus
destroy-
that Janeway eventually does.
Yeah, exactly. Does Shelby like, support him in that decision? And thus maybe casting her in a bit of a villain role when it comes to to the conclusion of the
Right.
episode, or does she, in her research of the Borg, become more of an advocate for Hugh in that it's like we brought you back, why can't we bring Hugh back?
Yeah. I do think that they should have brought her back. She is fantastic in these two episodes, and it was a missed opportunity. But I think that comes up to the fact that this was kind of the first time that Star Trek really were playing around with having things have echoes throughout the series. And Shelby was unfortunately one of those things that kind of got lost put to the wayside.
Is it the Excalibur books that she ends up being the first officer, or is it the Titan books? I forget. I read some of the Excalibur books, but it's been so long. Yeah. She's so good. You were just saying, MC, about how like she was maybe one of the people that like got the Defiant like up and running. Imagine if it's her in DS9 who like delivers the Defiant. Like how fucking cool would that have been?
That would have been awesome. I mean, like the Defiant was built specifically to fuck up the Borg.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Kang says Excalibur.
Yeah, it was Excalibur. Yep. I asked you because like there's not that many of them except when they're on the Borg cube trying to rescue Jean-Luc, or when they try to get him back the first time. Any ensemble moments that we're missing? Like this is, I feel yeah,
big time. Data and them, Locutus in Data's lab as Data works on him, and that you've got like Beverly there, you've got Deanna, you've got Miles there, and Data and Picard in that. It's probably my favorite ensemble moment. The whole like pacing back and forth and that between it, that Data looking for some sort of way to use Locutus at that point to make connection to the Borg to find a way. It plays out so beautifully in that, and it can't be understated. Like about Picard at the end of that, reaching through all the Borg like technology that was swimming through his system, and that we've seen what assimilation looks like inside the person's head, and that it's almost like they're in some sort of like an opiate state. He reaches through all that to connect to Data to give him the answer he needs, right? So
yeah,
in a way, he's the one who defeats him.
Yeah, for sure.
But great ensemble, and everybody plays a big part in that. Data like trying to make connection, Miles monitoring his vitals while Beverly monitors Picard's vitals, and Deanna looks to see if there's anything in that. And even though she doesn't have a lot of dialogue in that, it's all face acting with her in that.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, I would actually say it's probably one of the better Deanna parts in the ensemble, because it's always very hard to get the whole Betazoid powers thing to work. But in this, it actually does kind of translate very well into this whole mental journey of Locutus versus Picard, and her actually kind of getting to contribute to this whole thing. And I appreciate that, because this Betazoid powers was definitely something that they always wanted to be able to use, but it always comes off as a bit more Troy stating the obvious. And this is an emotional moment that she really gets to share that, and it's very impactful. And of course, I've already talked about Crusher and her feelings for Picard. And I think that even Wesley got some very nice moments on the bridge.
Yes,
Oh,
he did.
yes.
Yes.
that that little look he gives as like Riker says ramming speed.
Oh yeah, and he's like, "You heard
Yeah.
me, Ensign." Yeah. Oh, so good, so good.
Jordy got a little shafted though.
Little bit.
Kung just wrote plus an epic Geordi roll in engineering.
He'll never live. He never lived that down.
No.
Yeah, I think if I recall correctly from my trivia research that LeVar Burton had a conflict. So he was actually supposed to be the one that was monitoring data, but something came up. I think he was either injured or there was a filming conflict. And so they had to bring in O'Brien to do it instead.
That makes sense.
Hey, the most important man in Starfleet.
Yep.
Yep. I want to talk about the long-term legacy, which we kind of touched on at the top of the show, but also in the fandom, right? Its place in Trek history. Often voted the top TNG episode. Does it deserve that crown, or are there others that maybe top it, or is this really peak TNG?
Yeah,
It's a tough question.
I'd love to say that the best was yet to come as far as like as arcs and that. Obviously there was some great TNG that came out after this, but really they did hit kind of the Acme standard with this. Because it was revolutionary, as we said. Throwing in a cliffhanger on that, you had to wait the entire summer to conclude. The way they finished it off so boldly and so brilliantly, where they just nailed it story wise, everything. Its legacy can't be like talked about enough. Yeah.
MC.
So I've often said that best is intellectual and favorite is emotional. And this is not my favorite episode, but this is the best episode. There is just so much going for this. Writing, production, acting, just this entire confluence of events to make these two episodes go together. And I do think that even the cliffhanger, the 2 months, 3 months or whatever of wait time did contribute to all of it. And it's beautiful. And it's something that I don't think TNG ever topped. And I do think that it's still at the top of most Star Trek. I think that it would probably, it'll be a forever argument as to what is actually the best Star Trek story overall. I don't know if we could ever truly agree on it because there's too many variables, but yeah, it's certainly up there.
Yeah. You were right, by the way. LeVar was in emergency surgery, Kung wrote. So his scenes were carefully filmed, apparently, when most of the production had already concluded on the season. It's not my favorite either, because that will always be all good things for me. I will talk about that finale till people get bored, and I'll still keep talking about it. This is still, I think, like, that's just like what MC was saying. Like, All Good Things is my personal favorite. I still would say that this is a better two-parter, right? It is that good. It is that good. Merch, memes, definitely memes. Recreations in the sense that Voyager picked up the Borg and rolled with it to the point that Voyager and Janeway became more synonymous with the Borg than Jean-Luc Picard did. This episode has lived on through so much of Trek. Is there anything that sticks out to you on that front?
Ooh, like what comes out after it? I mean, yeah. I mean, like, we got a whole deluge of the Borg after this, and that was especially with Voyager and that. But we also had some great moments, like from Lower Decks with the Borg. And then when they brought them back for Prodigy, like nobody saw that coming, right? An episode of Prodigy.
The Prodigy episode's so good.
Yeah. Oh, so good. I mean, yeah, no one really sticks out in my mind other than Borg babies and that,
Borg babies.
I still have our fridge magnets up in that.
I mean, listen, talking about that, like one of our collective members, our Bad Rolls, Matt Harker, did that excellent Boimler Borg baby cosplay on the cruise.
Yep.
So, I mean, it just lives on in like so many different ways. MC, how about you?
There's just so many. I don't even know if I could possibly come up with. This is an episode that does go outside of Trek. Not far outside of Trek. I think it's only like the big things like Locutus, like people can recognize Picard as a Borg, but it is certainly monumental. And just, I mean, in terms of merch, I mean, I think every time Star Trek gets picked up by a different line, you get a Locutus figure.
You get
held up your...
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You held up your Funko Pop. I mean, we don't really have that many Star Trek Funkos.
He's so cute. We call him Locutus. Locutus of Borg.
That's in Ensign Sue Must Die. That's what Ensign Sue calls her Borgified dog. It's the cuteness.
Adorable. MC, you also used for your poster, you said that reference photos for Locutus were harder to find, so you used the X06.
I did, yeah, because the actual screen images were very dark, so I used the X06 because I was able to get like the full 360 on it, and a lot of detail work.
Yeah, that's incredible. We're gonna wrap this up. Very final thoughts. I feel like we've covered most of this on what makes the Best of Both Worlds still resonate so much. Hawk.
I go back to necessity being the mother of invention, and that maybe because people they always want to try and top the Borg when they come up with new villains and that, but it's very hard to do. There's not many ways of making an enemy more dreadful than them.
Yeah. I know
honestly,
we've covered so much of it already.
I know, from a concept that was turned into from one thing to another, and then a production design that had to be finished within a week before filming, and that it's almost like it was touched from above.
Yeah. We've said that a few times tonight. How about you, MC?
Oh, it's just everything that we've already said. It's been completely covered already. But I really think that this episode takes the characters to another level, because for the first 2-3 seasons, they were kind of caricatures, really. And it's, I think, really with this that we finally start to get, these guys are fleshed out now. We've learned a lot about them. It's not that we didn't have things that came out in earlier episodes, but this was kind of a culmination.
Yeah. My next question I'm just going to answer because I didn't get to talk a lot about my own thoughts tonight. What modern Trek can learn from this? Well, I'm going to tell you very quickly. Modern Trek has learned from this. Hegemony Part 1 of Strange New Worlds, I think, is the closest we've gotten to Best of Both Worlds in a really long time. It's very good. And I'm allowed to give spoiler-free reviews. Hegemony Part 2, we've all watched it at this point. Some folks in the chat may have been at Tribeca and went to the premiere. It holds up. It gives you the Best of Both Worlds Part 2 treatment. It is very good. And I think people are going to be really happy with what they see. So what modern Trek can learn from it, I think that the Strange New Worlds writers room took this and I don't know. I don't want to say that they improved upon the model, but they took everything good about it and made a fantastic second parter. So I can't wait in just under 1 month for everybody to see that, because I think there's a lot of Best of Both Worlds in Hegemony Part 2. I don't know if you guys agree, but
I agree totally. I saw it as soon as I watched it.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah. That's it from us. We have some very quick mailbag. I'm surprised more people didn't mailbag on Best of Both Worlds. I'm judging only a little bit. We'll go
limerick this week, by the way.
No limerick. Come on, Tara. We're going in reverse order. MC, can you start with Matt Harker's, please?
Matt Harker wrote, "The legacy of Best of Both Worlds is essentially the path to Voyager making it home, which gave us Prodigy and entire plot lines of all three seasons of Picard. I can't think of a more impactful story on the Star Trek universe, and I do think it sets a high bar by which all two-part cliffhangers are still measured to this day. The most jaw-dropping to be continued ever."
Indeed. Very well said. Hawk, you take Dave Primes, please.
Sure, Dave Prime wrote Best of Both Worlds quite possibly has the biggest cliffhanger moment in all of Trek and top caliber for any other TV series that had followed. Riker's order to fire at the end still gives me chills 35 years later. It affected fans galore, including the ones spouting off at Patrick Stewart, claiming that their summer was ruined because of him. That shows even then the show had a significant impact.
Even without the internet, people found a way to, give actors shit. It's pretty incredible. I will take us home with NRLI 2 wrote, Best of Both Worlds is still hands down the best Trek season ending cliffhanger and two-parter. I can still remember spending the summer of 1990 speculating with my friends how they'd wrap up the story and whether Picard would survive. One downside is Berman & Co. began the practice of filming part 1 without knowing how part 2 would end, though you don't really feel like you notice that with this, where you could notice it in other media today. They lucked out here, but we got some real clunkers like Time's Arrow. Yeah. Oh, Time's Arrow. I just watched the tail end of Time's Arrow the other day. Yeah. Oh, man. That's going to do it. I feel old as fuck. 35 years later, we are talking about the best of both worlds. It's incredible. I had a blast doing the watch along last night with the crew. Had a blast chatting with both of you about it tonight, and we will be back live next week. I'm going to surprise you with what our episode will be. It's something Giraffe has been asking for a few weeks now. We're going to do an AMA. Ask Us Anything. That is going to be our episode next week. Please be gentle.
Please ask us things.
Yeah, please ask us things. Be gentle, though. It's going to be a lot of fun. Please, if you haven't yet, hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell to be notified when we post a video or go live. And leave us some reviews. We could use some love on Apple Podcasts. We could use some love on Spotify. Helps get us in the algorithm, though our numbers have been great lately. Thanks to MC a lot, by the way, for that. That is going to do it. John Luke, Locutus, the best of both worlds, all of it. I might go watch it again right now. For Hawk, for MC, I'm Julian. Live long and prosper. Resistance is not futile. Majram, good night. This is going to be awkward because this is not my other computer. We're ending now. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks for beaming into our podcast today. If you want to keep the hailing frequencies open, you can subscribe on Apple and Google Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. Like what you hear? Put in a good word with Starfleet and leave us a 5-star review.